My friend, if you are at retirement age or you're headed toward retirement age, and it's either one or the other, well, I think today's Weekend Connection is for you. I'm going to be talking in just a moment with Michael Cranford. So, what do you say we get connected with Michael on Weekend Connection? Good afternoon. Welcome to Weekend Connection on the Bible Broadcasting Network. I have as my guest today Michael Cranford. He is a certified financial planner. And right off the bat, I do want to say that we're not going to be giving out any specific investment advice. That's not our place, or really nor his. But we're going to be talking about some issues, generally speaking, regarding, folks who are in, quote, retirement age or moving toward that, and just some general issues to be thinking about. Michael, welcome to Weekend Connection.
Thanks so much. Appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate you taking the time to be with me and our BBN listeners. Michael, before we get into some of these general issues, tell our BBN listeners a little bit about yourself, please.
Sure. So I am one of three children. Grew up in a small rural town where my concept of wealth and riches was really limited to observations I had, things like the number of stairs in your house and all sorts of childlike beliefs about what constituted wealth. I have had the pleasure of serving the kingdom as a certified financial planner for a number of years now, and have had the delight to serve the Lord and many families in that capacity.
And how did you get into this field of certified financial planning?
Well, it's the Lord has done a redemptive work in my life as He has in many others, and I found myself early in my professional career wanting to find a way to use a business oriented skill set to serve others. And financial planning is one of those fields where you see an intersection between personal, relational, and emotional issues, and also complex technical issues. And the Lord opened up a door to be able to blend a business skill set with an opportunity to serve the body. And that's what drew me to it.
Uh huh. And where did you attend college?
I attended college at a small liberal arts Baptist college called Wingate University outside of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Mm hmm. And you got your degree in financial planning there?
Yes, I have a degree in a bachelor's degree in finance, certified financial planner, also a certified wealth specialist, and a chartered advisor in philanthropy. So it's a sort of the alphabet soup of certification, so to say.
I noticed that on your title on my email that there's all sorts of combinations of letters that I have no idea what they mean, but I did know of one out of the three or four. But Michael, the reason why I invited you on is really to talk about some general issues. And again, I want to say that no specific investment advice is going to be given on Weekend Connection, but something that I heard on the radio some time ago regarding especially senior citizens. And this really kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, really. And I heard this several years ago, that senior citizens, more and more, the number one reason that many of them face personal bankruptcy or file for personal bankruptcy is because of medical expenses as well as other things, but primarily medical expenses. And I really got to thinking about that, and I thought, wow, things have really changed. And it got me to thinking as well, what are some things people can do, whether they are in the quote retirement years or approaching the quote retirement years, to ward things off like that as best as possible?
I do think that this is a significant issue, and it really spans the entire life spectrum. There was a CNBC article that came out not not too terribly long ago that cited nearly two-thirds of people who file for bankruptcy cite medical issues as a key contributor to their financial downfall. And I think that becomes particularly relevant in retirement years because most retirees are on a fixed income. And so when their expenses increase, there's limited opportunity for income to increase to offset those costs. There's a unique challenge that's faced later in life. When we're young, we feel invincible in a lot of ways, and as we age, no matter where you're at on that spectrum, we find ourselves with our joints are a little tighter than they used to be. We find ourselves coming face to face with the fact that we are fallen beings awaiting eternal bodies. So we run into an area of financial planning that we refer to as long-term care planning. Many folks are familiar with the conversation around the need for life insurance, preparing for death. So, some of us are familiar with the concept of disability insurance, replacing income whenever we might have an injury that happens on the job and we can no longer work. One of the most significant issues that faces retirees is actually what we call long-term care concerns, and that is losing the ability to care for ourselves to a significant enough extent that we require assistance later in life. So these are chronic issues, things like Alzheimer and dementia, Parkinson's, some of those more advanced chronic care type of events that can happen in life. So the number one conversation we have with families who are nearing or in retirement around this is actually this idea of thinking through whether or not it makes sense to acquire some long-term care insurance. And that long-term care insurance covers those costs that are associated with things like assisted living or nursing home care or even home health care in the event that you're unable to care for yourself because of a chronic condition. Recent statistics show that depending on where you're located and the complexity of your condition, care of that level can cost anywhere from 18 all the way up to $89,000 per year. So it is a significant cost, and it's not surprising that it is such a significant contributor to bankruptcy and financial difficulty in retirement years. And so a common conversation we have is about purchasing long-term care coverage.
I was talking with somebody, a few years ago about this. And isn't it true that some insurance companies have actually gotten out of issuing long term care policies?
Yeah, that's a great observation. Long-term care insurance is a newer form of insurance, and when we think about insurance, any form of insurance being new, insurance is not a new concept, but on a relative basis. And what happened over the years is that a good insurance company will diversify its product line, and there were a lot of companies who were marketing long-term care insurance as a primary product line. And what was observed over time was that the claims rate on that coverage and the costs associated with that coverage wound up being higher than initially anticipated. So you started to see rate changes. And yes, some companies got out of the business altogether. And so really the players that we generally are comfortable with in the conversations that we have with families are the big names out there who provide various forms of insurance and happen to provide long-term care coverage as one product line.
And of course, in this conversation, life expectancies have, they have increased, have they not?
They have significantly. It's one of the interesting, beautiful in a lot of ways outcomes of an improved medical system and over the years has been that people live longer than they used to. And so having longevity planning as part of your financial planning conversations is very relevant and because it's not uncommon now to see individuals and couples even live well into their late 80s and early 90s. And when we retire in our, say, your average family's couple might be retiring in their mid 60s. When you're thinking about that, it's really hard to conceptualize life 30 plus years down the road and what it would be like and how expensive it can be. And until you start thinking about what life was like 30 years ago and how much more expensive it was or it is now than it was then.
And isn't it true that people are working longer and longer and really not tapping Social Security until they absolutely have to? And just because times really have changed.
It is, it's been fascinating to observe the number of families who, while they would like to retire and might feel comfortable retiring, are really hesitant to do so because they are thinking about, and I think appropriately so, thinking about the long term. And so we are seeing families defer Social Security longer and defer retirement longer. And that's really, it's been good to see that because another common mistake that I'd say that individuals make is drawing Social Security too early, not because not because they need to. There are certainly situations where it makes sense for a family to or for an individual to start drawing Social Security before full retirement age. But if you make that decision without considering the implications, say, for example, you draw when you're 62 years old, which is the earliest you could actually draw Social Security, you're going to have a permanent 30% reduction in your benefit. And while you would benefit over the years from cost of living adjustments that are tied to Social Security, that 30% is not going away. And over time, it's a pretty significant contributor, especially when you think about increasing healthcare costs over time. Not having that extra cash every month can make a big difference. And so that's another area I think that as individuals and families plan through their retirement years, that's another consideration to give is not necessarily I should always in all circumstances defer Social Security, but can I afford to? And having an answer to that question will help inform that discussion.
Well, that's so true. And fact is, of course, that for every year that you leave Social Security on the table until you have to withdraw, you're gaining 8%.
Yeah, and all the way up until you reach age 70, there's a deferral benefit that's tied to that, and it's tremendous. And it's important to remember as well that if you're a married couple, that benefit, particularly before you reach retirement age, it's not only impacting you, but it may very well impact your spouse. If you're married going into retirement and in your Social Security years, your spouse will actually receive a benefit as well. Your benefit is actually going to be the greater of 50% of your spouse's benefit or your own record. And so if your full retirement age is say 67 years old and you draw at 62 and your spouse will actually be drawing from your record as well, that 30% reduction impacts you both. And so it magnifies the consequence of drawing early.
Back to the long term care for just a moment before we wrap things up. When should people start? At what age generally should people start thinking about that and planning for that, as well as perhaps thinking about some other issues related to retirement?
Yeah, so I do think there's a season of life where it's too early. So, for example, if you're in your mid 30s, it's not the right season of life to be thinking about purchasing long-term care coverage. It's not an inexpensive coverage. Uh, Really, we feel that age between say 50 and 65, really mid 50s, is a great time to be thinking through that. And then particularly as you start to ease into your 60s, you have to keep in mind that if you start to develop a health issue that could be chronic in nature, that's going to impact your ability to obtain that coverage and also what you might pay for that coverage. And so, generally speaking, mid 50s is a great season to be thinking through long term care insurance. And it's also a great season just to be thinking overall about the general retirement conversation because by this point in time, many individuals and families, if they have children, their children have gone on to college and are perhaps out on their own. And so a lot of the variables that contribute to financial planning early in life are known, and they can really start to focus on those issues that are going to be impacting them for the long term. And this is also the same season where I start to counsel families to start thinking through test driving their retirement expenses. I think we can idealize what our lifestyles will be like in retirement and somehow think we'll have the freedom to do what we want and also not spend as much money. But generally, we wind up being creatures of habit. We wind up spending the same in retirement that we spent before we retired. So I'll counsel families in this same season to make sure you know what's going out so that you have a good idea of what you could expect to need in retirement.
Michael Cranford, thank you so much for joining me and our BBN listeners today on Weekend Connection. This has been so helpful. Thank you so very much. Weekend Connection is a public affairs program of the Bible Broadcasting Network. Weekend Connection is heard on the Bible Broadcasting Network every Saturday afternoon at 4:02 p.m. Eastern Time, following the 4 p.m. news. That's Weekend Connection on the Bible Broadcasting Network.
Thank you for listening to this feature, a production of BBN, the Bible Broadcasting Network. BBN provides 24-hour Christian programming, great Christian music, and Bible teaching. Listen to BBN by clicking the link in the description.